as I told you, my motivation for helping families like yours is the experience that my own family went through. We had land. For a while, that land was productive. It's where my grandma was raised. It's where they earned their living. But when my grandma and her line of family members got to a certain age, they moved away. Nobody wanted to stay in Sondheimer, Louisiana. They moved to Las Vegas, Chicago, Ohio, places that were like more cities and things, and they didn't have any use for this family land. They figured it was no point in them holding on to it if they were just paying taxes on it and not doing anything with it. So I have created this workshop for people who have inherited or may one day inherit heirs property and who are tired of using their money to pay taxes on property that they're not using, just like my family was. They're looking for ideas for how the property could be used. I have this belief that if my family members who decided to sell the land had a vision for how they could use the land, if they knew what they could do to make money from the land, or at least not to be paying out of their own pockets to keep the land, then perhaps they would have decided to keep it. This is also for families who need guidance on how to clear the title to their property. Heirs property, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but usually it's several generations. It's been in the family for several generations, and it's hard to know who all are owners of the property. And so this workshop is for people who need guidance on what they need to do to clear the title to the property. And also for those who are wondering how to approach long-term planning for their property. And you know, like when you have all these family members involved, how do you come up with the long-term strategy for land? So that's another thing that we are going to be doing. And then finally, for people who thought that selling the property was the only solution to resolving heirs property, my goal is to help you to see that there are lots of things that you can do other than sell the property. So now what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the things that you can do with your family land. And when I say with family land, you could do this with any land. If you bought land off of the market, or you bought it from another landowner directly, however you got your land, you can do these things. But what I'm talking about is families who own this property together, and they really need to think of some ways to generate revenue. These are some things that you can do with your land. So of course, farming, I think that's what a lot of people think of first, because that's what a lot of times the folks who had the land before, they farmed it. Forestry, you can grow trees on it and harvest the timber. A lot of people do that as a way to have a regular source of revenue coming into the family. It's like an investment. Rental properties, you can put a house on the land or trailers. I have someone that I know who they own about 100 acres, and they were thinking we can use part of it to build a trailer park. You know, put all the resources on there and put trailers there, and we provide housing for folks, affordable housing, and we can generate a regular source of income from it. And if it's a smaller tract, you have an acre or two, you can put a house on it. We had someone mention that they are in McIntosh County. That's a tourist area. You can put a property on there that's rented out to folks who are coming for vacation. I know of a family who is considering putting a solar farm on their property. I don't know if y'all seen any, if you and anybody in Middle Georgia, there's one in Macon County that, you know, it's just land, and you got all these solar panels just all laid out there. And you can, you know, anybody who owns land, that's an option for them. Put a solar farm out there, excuse me, sell the power back to the power company. The logistics of that we won't go into, but that's an option that's available. Commercial leasing. There are all kinds of companies that are looking to do various activities, and they need land to do it. One way they can do it is buy the land. Another way they can do it is to lease the land. And a lot of times these are long-term leases that they will pay, you know, on an annual basis, sums of money for an extended period of time. That's an option. Also, a lot of people these days are growing hemp. They you know, it's certain aspects of marijuana cultivation is becoming legal here in Georgia and other parts of the country, people are growing hemp. And hemp is something that is, you know, it's not only medicinal uses or other uses that we know about, but people use it in building houses and construction. So that's a great source of renewable resources that people are using to do construction. Agritourism, you know, having people come to your farm or to your land to do things that, you know, help, they can pay you to come and do a hayride or eat some strawberry ice cream or whatever it is that you might want to do. And then also, you know, it could just be a recreational or vacation site for the family. Instead of them having to go and pay for an expensive bed and breakfast somewhere, you might have a spot on the family land that people can rent out, that family members can rent out or just go to without paying money. And then last one I have on here is a tech hub. I saw that somebody had bought, I think 16 acres in Jackson, Mississippi, and she was gonna have companies come in, tech companies come in and lease out space or build buildings on the, I don't know how it's gonna work, but she's basically trying to bring technology companies to Jackson, Mississippi. And, you know, I think a family that owns land could try something like that. So these are just some options that I wanted to present to create a vision to help us to see that there's so much we can do with land. I heard somebody say it yesterday, and I've heard it many times before, that God is not creating any more land, but there are ways that we can, you know, the land that we do have, there's ways to use it to help, you know, it's just like, there's no more land being created, but the uses for the land are infinite. So I want us to really be creative in the way we look at this. Some of you may have some other ideas. If you have other ideas for how families can utilize their family land, please share it in the chat. I would love to see what other ideas come to mind when you think, what can we do with our family land? All right, so got some of that background information done. We're going to talk about what is heirs property, just to make sure we are all on the same page as I mentioned before. So the way that I define heirs property is property that's passed down from one generation to the next in a way that results in an increasing number of family members owning the property. So I have this example here. Let's say we have our original owner who, you know, John Smith, who bought this property, you know, back in 1965. And now John Smith, he's passed away. He had 3 children, Jane and Jack and Jill, all of those 3 children. One of them is still living, but 2 of them have passed away. So y'all, I'm trying to have these creative names. I can't remember what I called for. So it's gonna be child 1, child 2, and child 3. So child 1, when they died, they had a spouse. They were married. They had their spouse who's still living, and they also had 2 children. These are the original owner's grandchildren, grandchild 1A and grandchild 1B. Child 3, when child 3 passed away, they were not married, but they did have 1 child. So that's grandchild 3A. So as you see, the original owner who bought the land in 1964 was just one person. He had 3 children. And now, after a couple of generations, the heirs property, the property is now owned by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, going from 1 to 5 people. And as you can imagine, each generation, the number grows. And this is something that can happen whether or not you have a will. If you have a will, a lot of times, and this happens a whole lot, people say, I leave my house or I leave my land to my 5 children. And how many of y'all know that 5 people can't own a house together? That's not going to work out too well. And then land, it can be a little easier, but without any kind of instructions, it can be hectic to have 5 people owning 1 piece of land. And so that can happen whether if you have a will, but even if you don't have a will, that can happen because state law just divides everything between your children equally. It doesn't really look at who would be the best fit. And this is only if you have children. For people who don't have children, then there's other relatives who are going to be involved in the ownership of their property. And as you can see, as each generation goes, there's going to be more and more people who own this property. This is a little example of how that first situation where we had the 5 people owning the property can get more complicated. I want to unmute y'all, or if you feel comfortable unmuting yourself and just telling me, what's your first thought when you see this slide? Anybody want to share?
It's trouble.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
trouble.
a lot of trouble in the family.
Yes, trouble. Anybody else have a thought of what they see?
I have a question. This is
Yes.
Wanda. I mean, our property, I'm from South Carolina. I mean, our property is in South Carolina. We have a problem. Our problem was, our property was for my mother. But as the generation went down, now the problem with ours is our older brother. Our older brother had the had the kids. And his kids extended probably like a football team or something. These people don't want to get involved with the property. Going in, oh, well, we're not going to get involved with this property right here, but we didn't want to give it up. It's not really a whole lot of property after we divided it up, but we didn't want to get rid of it because it was our mother. Now the thing is that one child out of my brother wanted to do it. One of his children, I think 1 or 2 of them, wanted to get involved. Then the other ones come in now, we want to, but they didn't want to pay any money to try to get this stuff done. But now they want to reap the benefits. But it's not a whole lot. But you see what I'm saying? Now we got property. We got problems with, well, we're entitled to something. I'm like, okay, when we threw it out there for everybody to come involved, nobody wanted to do it. Now when it looks like it's coming into existence, look like it's something got to be available. It's like, oh, you didn't let us know. All these letters went out, everything went out, they put it in a drawer. And then the 2 children of my older brother decided to get involved.
Well, I think everybody on here who owns Heirs property can say amen to all the stuff that you have just said, because they have all experienced similar things. This is a common situation with Heirs property. And that's part of my goal, is to help families to kind of navigate these things, because it is frustrating when you have a group of people who've been working hard on this thing, and then other folks come out the woodworks and they want to now get their part of the pie. And so, I think it does require some creativity to think through how to approach it. And then, sometimes when you start asking people for their fair share and requiring it as a part of moving forward, then they decide that they want to just go ahead and sign their part over. But that's something that when I do the Heirs property class, and that's something that we will have an opportunity to talk more in depth about. And we can also, if there's any more questions after this program, then you definitely can let me know. We can talk about those as well.
Yes,
but yes.
It's not anything it's nothing really big, but when people thinking now, when it's coming in provision, they're thinking there's money involved, that I'm gonna get something. Not everybody look, oh, we gotta have some money, but it's nothing like that. But when it's thinking, putting out money, oh, we backing up. I don't want, that's word of mouth. Then all of a sudden it's like, could we be getting a little money? Now it's like, oh, I didn't know about this, but it's a whole lot of mess, but it's not a whole lot of property. Because when you saw my little piece of paperwork, it's not a whole lot of property going on here. But when it's coming down, it's thinking it's money. But that's how things work.
And that happens so much. And we'll talk about it a little bit more in this workshop, just some things that you can do to be more objective in your approach. I think a lot of times, and I'm not saying that you're not doing this, but a lot of times families handle it in a certain way that the details aren't clear. And so people, they can have these imaginations of what all is involved, but once you have that black and white, these are the numbers, these are the actual things, and sometimes it kind of gets people thinking more clearly. So we can talk more about that later today, and then or this evening. And then if later you have additional questions, we can see if we need to schedule a consultation, or if you want to do the class, if that might be helpful to you to kind of go more in depth on these things.
Okay, that's what I just wanted a little knowledge on it, because that's all I wanted when I said I wanted some knowledge on this, because it's a whole lot of mess going on. Thank you.
Right. I mean, your story is what I've heard so much. And so I just want to go back to this slide here and show y'all, you see all these people I have here, even in the middle, we have grandchild 2C's baby mama. Grandchild 2C, you know, had a child with this woman. That child has passed away. And so now we have the baby mama involved. So, you know, you talk about mess. These are the kind of messes that we end up with, where you have people who not even related by marriage involved. So, you know, these are the challenges that we're dealing with, but it's good to go ahead and be able to identify the issues and work through it strategically, you know, one step at a time, so that you can actually get some results. So, you know, Ms. Jemison just gave us an example of the challenges with heirs property. And I know that most of you on here probably can relate as well with your own challenges, but there still might be some of you who are like, so what? You know, heirs property is what it is. I've had people that when I've done these workshops in the past, similar workshops, then they say, you know, well, the old folks, you know, they wanted it to be heirs property because they wanted to make it harder for people to sell it. So it's been heirs property all this time. Why should we change it? And we'll, you know, if that last slide wasn't enough to show you the problems that we can have, and I only showed y'all a few generations. I'm sure some of y'all here either have personal experience or have seen where, you know, where the original person who bought the land in 1964 had 18 kids. And now all those 18 kids got 10 kids apiece. And then those 10 kids apiece got 5 kids or 3 kids. And you can just imagine how fast that grows. So that's one problem with heirs property. So all these people owning this property, and they have equal rights to use the property. Nobody can say, this is my land, this is my house. When it's heirs property, it's everybody's everything. You have it where co-owners can sell their part of the property to someone outside the family. This has been a big issue, especially when you have the land that's close to the coast. People, you know, that a developer comes in and they see a family with this land on the coast, and you got that one family member in New York who doesn't care about the property, has never seen the property, and now they sell their little part to a developer for, you know, $5,000. And now that developer is a part of the family owning this land along with everybody else. And so that causes issues. And you have it where these outside developers, they come in, they own part of property, then they want to file a partition and have the property sold. So that's something that has been a big issue. There's been some legislation that's addressed it, but it's still a possible issue. Also, you have actions concerning the property that require the agreement of all the co-owners. You have, you know, in order to sell the property, you got to have everybody on board. If you want to get the timber cut, you got to have everybody on board. If you want to borrow money so that you can put a fence around the property, you got to have everybody's permission. And then that property can be subject to the debts of the co-owners. If somebody, you know, comes, you know, they don't pay some debts and they get a judgment against them, that judgment can be put against the property, and then cause the property to be at risk of the debts. Another one I forgot to put on here is just when people are co-owners of the property and they die, then their heirs are going to become owners of the property. But their heirs may or may not be people who are on board with the vision of the rest of the family, kind of like what Ms. Jemison said. We have, you know, the children or the grandchildren coming in, and they don't have that connection to the property that the others have. And so they can be problems to deal with. And then finally, you know, issues that everybody's not going to do their part. And it's going to be some people in the family who have to carry more of the weight than others when you have heirs property. So, you know, I told y'all all the problems. And so you might be like, okay, what we gonna do about it? So this is where we're gonna get into these 5 things that we can do. And there's a whole lot more that families might need to do, but I just wanted to highlight a few of them to kind of get you going. These are things that for the most part, a family can start working on them before hiring an attorney. A lot of times families, they come in early in the process and they hire an attorney, and the attorney, you know, a lot of attorneys don't really understand heirs property. They know all the other legal stuff, but they don't understand that family dynamic. But even if they do, they're getting this attorney to help them through the preliminary stages, and that's billable hours. That's $250 an hour, $300 an hour for something that if you have the right information, you can get started on your own and save some time and money. So that's these 5 things that we're gonna go through. Looking at the time, 7:36, I'm gonna try not to take up too much time. I would say that I will try to go through all the information before 8 o'clock and then let everybody go who needs to go. But if there's any questions, then we can deal with those for a few minutes after 8 o'clock. But before we go, I just want to do a quick check-in. Not before we go, before we continue. I want to do a quick check-in to see if there are any questions or concerns, or, you know, make sure I'm not losing anybody as we're going. And when I say questions, not specific to your personal family situation, but more so just in terms of what I've covered, making sure everything's clear and there's no concerns. All right, well, we are going to go ahead and go into the 5 things that heirs property owners must do to convert their property from a tax liability to a profitable asset. And the first thing that we're going to do, that you need to do, is get clear on who are the owners of the property. And there are 2 angles to approach ownership. One of them is the record title owner, and the other is the actual title owners. And these are kind of phrases that I've come up with. The actual title owners, this way I kind of describe it, but there might be other ways to look at it. So with the record title owners, those people are determined from the county land records. It's based upon the deeds and the affidavits that are recorded in the county land records. And it requires a skilled title abstractor and title attorney when we're talking about heirs property to determine who are the record title owners of the property. Now, when we're talking about heirs property, very often the person who is listed in the land records as being the owner of the property has been deceased for 1 or more generations. And so, you know, we can't decide who owns the property just based upon those land records, because we have to see who the heirs of that person are to determine who actually is the record title owner. Another thing that I want to point out with determining who the record title owner is that there might be multiple people who are listed as record title owners. So for example, let's see, you have a man who, I'm gonna be equitable. We have a woman who bought some property back in, 1927, if that was allowed, because women weren't always allowed to own land, but we're just gonna say it. A woman bought some property in 1927. She had 5 children, and it was always understood that the oldest daughter was the one who inherited the land. Let me rephrase that. So you have this woman who bought this land. She had 5 children, and she divided the land up between her 5 children. Let's put it that way. And she gave each of them a deed for the property. So you have these multiple people who have a deed for the property, but it may not be that she gave a clear deed that you know who got what. You just know that you have these 5 deeds for these 5 children. So it could end up that you have more than one person listed as the title owner. And I say that because I don't want anybody going to the land records and pulling a deed and saying, I got the deed for the property, because there could be other deeds for the property in there, especially if my example probably wasn't the way I should have said is that you had the 5 children. Those 5 children had children, and then one of those children deeded their part to one of their children. So it's like you kind of skip a generation and you don't know exactly who all the owners are. If that's not making sense, let me just say it this way, that you're really gonna need somebody who knows how to search deed records, who has that experience and that skill set to help you to determine who really are the record title owners of a property. And that's done through a title search. And then you have the actual title owners. These are the current living heirs of the original record title owners. So these are, the people who are the descendants from that person who might be listed in the land records, who's been deceased for a while, or those people who have been deceased for a while. And the way that you determine who these individuals are is by creating a family tree. And you create the family tree, you start with the first person in the family to own the property. And then you look at, okay, were they married? Did they have children? And you kind of go down the line that way. If they were married when they died, their spouse survived them, make sure their spouse didn't have any other children after that. And then also look at, who their children were. Then you're going to go to the next generation, look at the children of those original children, and just see if you just kind of break it down each way. And I will, make available to those who participate in the class a spreadsheet to help them to figure out how to create their family tree. So the next thing that you would do, so after you know who owns the property according to the county land records, and you have a good idea of who are the owners of the property in the family based upon that family tree, the next thing I recommend that you do is establish a family steering committee. And I would say, let me not say the next thing, because this is something that you might do before, like you might already create this steering committee, and then that steering committee helps you to develop the family tree. These things are not in any particular order, but it's just things that you want to keep in mind. Give me a moment to get a drink of water. Okay, so you're going to establish this family steering committee. And I think a good approach is to have a respected member from each branch of the family. That way you are having to deal with fewer people. And then as these families grow, it's harder to find relatives from different branches who are close to each other. So it's good to get someone from each branch who can represent the interests of that branch. And then an individual is going to serve as a liaison between their branch of the family and then the rest of the steering committee. So the steering committee, they're going to come together. They're going to be creating the plans. They're going to be coming up with ideas and contacting people to help the family accomplish their goals. And then they communicate that to the family members in the branches of the family. And also in the reverse, if there's any concerns from the different branches, they'll bring those to the steering committee so that those can be considered. And then their goal is to work to build consensus on issues within their branch. That's why I recommend a respected member of the family, somebody who has that kind of authority or that respect, that people are not going to argue back and forth with them, or that when they say something, people trust their word in that family. So, and when you're dealing with bigger and bigger families, you might have to have multiple people within the different branches serving on that steering committee, because you have different branches from the other branches, as the tree grows. So the next thing that you need to do is get a handle on the property taxes. Make sure you're getting those under control. And so I recommend that you contact the tax commissioner's office for the county where the property is located. Make sure that they have the right person as the point of contact. That's the person who's going to receive tax notices. Make sure that the address is up to date and that those notices are going to get to someone who's going to make sure that the taxes get paid. You want to find out if there are any back taxes owed, any back property taxes owed, and just kind of see what that amount is so that you can make sure that that's not an issue. I know I used to work with a nonprofit that dealt with heirs property issues. And a big thing that would happen is people would contact us when the county is about to sell the property because the taxes were owed. And the family's like, we need somebody to stop this tax sale. And it's like, no, we can't help you stop the tax sale. You got to pay the taxes to stop the tax sale. So it's important that you go ahead and think about these things from the beginning. Make sure there's nothing old that you need to get caught up on. And then also in the process, while you're talking with the tax commissioner, find out if your family's property is eligible for any property tax exemptions. When we're talking about family land, often in rural communities, if the property is used for farming or timber, then the family might be able to apply for a conservation use valuation assessment. And that's one where I think that the property value is reduced from the fair market value, which is the price that it would get if it was sold on the market, is reduced to 40% of that amount. And that's how they calculate the taxes. So the taxes could be, I think it's 40% of what they would be if you are not under this conservation use valuation assessment. And then, you want to see, are we eligible for this? If we're not eligible, what can we do to become eligible? Find out, because this is, possibly a good way to save the family money. It makes a huge difference. And then finally, outline a strategy for paying the taxes that requires buy-in from all members or from different branches of the family. So if the taxes, there's like a back tax bill, the family has to catch up in order to get the taxes current, then you need a strategy for how we're going to get these taxes caught up. But then even if the taxes are up to date, you need a strategy moving forward so that everybody is doing their part to carry the taxes. And a good clean way is to say we're going to do it based upon the branches of the family. The first person, granddaddy, he had 10 kids. So we're going to divide these taxes 10 ways. And within those branches, y'all figure out how you're going to get your part. That's one way to do it. Or you can just, go and divide it up between all the family members and make them pay their percentage that they are required. But that takes a little bit more work than to just go according to the branches. And some county offices will let family members pay directly to the county office instead of having to go through you. Some of them, they say they only want one check. So you just want to check with your local county office to see what they require. Number 4, you need to make sure that you understand the property value, the property boundaries, its value, and its characteristics. This is what I was talking about earlier with Ms. Jemison, that a lot of times once you get these black and white numbers, it can help people to think more realistically about what they're entitled to, what the property is worth. It's no need to hide this information. So, it's good to go ahead and know how much it's worth. And you can do that by getting a property appraiser. That's something you can do early. Get the property appraised so you know how much it's worth. So people won't be saying, I know there's some money in here, I want my $50,000. It's like, no, the property's worth $50,000. So your part is actually about $200. You want me to go and pay you now? You can get some people off easily by, finding out how much their part is actually worth and just basically buying their part, getting a deed and paying them to get a deed for their part. To get them to deed their part over to you. So that's one option that you can do, one strategy that you can use. But it's good to have those cold hard numbers. How much is this property really worth? If we were to sell it, what would we get for it? What would each family member get? And then go from there, kind of talk realistically with people. You want to also get a surveyor involved so that you know the boundaries of the property. And that surveyor, they're going to go out there with their boots on and their truck and their equipment, and they're going to go and see what the boundaries of the property are. They're going to also, see that there's this lake that runs that's in the middle of where there's this creek or this river that runs through the property. They'll be able to help you to see if there's any setback requirements from the county office. So the surveyor can tell you a lot about your property because they're actually walking it and finding what the boundaries are. They're pulling deeds and just getting a lot of information about the property that you might not have available to you. And it's good to have those boundaries. And if you think, some families might say, we have a large enough piece of land that we're going to just divide it between each branch of the family. Each family branch get 10 acres, each branch get 8 acres, whatever it might be. they can go ahead and have that surveyor to outline some possible ways to divide the property up so that everybody knows what they're getting, and you can work together to figure out what the boundaries of everybody's part is going to be. And then also you might want to get some kind of land consultant, whether it's a forestry consultant who can help you to understand what your timber might be worth if there's any trees on the property. They might be able to help you to come up with a plan for managing the trees and taking care of them to make sure they're healthy and in the best condition to sell later on. You might have an agricultural consultant who can tell you, what kind of things you can grow on the land, or help you find somebody who wants to lease the land. There's so many things you can do with land, and kind of based upon what your family is looking to do, you might want to go ahead and contact some consultants who can help you to see what the practicalities of getting that done would be. And then that's something you can use as you're talking to the family to see who really wants to participate, and if this is something they want to continue to be a part of. And the last thing that you want to do is establish your goals and develop a plan. And when I say establish your goals, I'm saying come up with some why is that word is just not some goalposts, some things that's gonna show you, okay, this is where we're going with this property. You want to think about your short-term goals, your long-term goals, and see where each family member stands with regard to each of them. Sometimes we can resolve a lot of family problems if we just see where everybody stands. You might find that there are a lot fewer people who want to keep the property than you thought. So, that's something that you can do. Talk about what everybody's short and long-term goals are. And it might be necessary to consider some family mediation to help you to come up with strategies, in a way that's not going to cause long-term divisions in the family. Also, you want to think about what your legal strategies are going to be. This is where you are going to need an attorney. And if you participate in the heirs property class, and we'll talk about the different options that are available to families when they talk with an attorney, so that they can come to the attorney with some knowledge. This, I've heard that we could do a partition. I've heard we can do quiet title. I've heard that probate might be something we need to do. You can go to that attorney with some ideas of what you already are, what you think might be needed. And then they can help you to decide if that actually makes sense for your particular family. You also need to talk about the legal strategies to consolidate title. How are you going to hold this land as a single entity moving forward? Are you going to put it into an LLC? Are you going to put it into a trust? What's going to be the pros and cons of each of those? And those are things that we'll talk more about in the heirs property class, that you can, to help you to think through some different options that your family might be interested in. And also, you want to create a sustainability plan for your property. Think about ways that you're going to generate money for the property on a long-term basis. There might be some things you do now that get you some immediate cash. For example, I'm working with a family now who we're trying to get someone appointed over the estate of the person who was the first one to own the property in the family, so that we can sell the timber. That's going to give us some cash to work with so that they can continue to pay an attorney, or so that they can do some things to the property so that it's ready to do the next thing. This family and others that I'm working with, they are doing it in a business. They're taking a business-minded approach where they're coming up with a business plan and developing ways to sustain the property in the short-term basis and in a long-term basis. And you want to make sure that your plan is going to provide long-term benefits for the family beyond sentimental value, because sentimental value is only going to go so far. If you weren't raised on the land, you didn't grow up on the farm, you might not have that sentimental value. And so it's going to be harder to convince family to keep the property if it's not doing anything for them. I talked to someone before who he's like a consultant in a way for families who own land, and he said it's like if you owned a business, like maybe a car dealership. You own a car dealership, and it was profitable, it was making money, but then right before you left it to your children, you sold all the cars and you fired all the staff. And so now you handed your children this empty shell of a business. They don't want that. They want something that actually has some value. And so you want to make sure that your plan is going to have those long-term benefits that are not just sentimental, but tangible, cold, hard cash sometimes. And so you want to do some research. It might take some monetary investment, but if the more work you do up front, the more benefits it's going to have for you later down the line. So those are the 5 things that that we want to do. And so before we go to the next thing, want to just check. Well, we'll go ahead and talk about the online course that I'm offering, just for the sake of time, and then we'll let people ask any questions they might have after we do that, so that if people need to leave, they can definitely do so. So what I am offering is a 3-month online course. This is the first time I'm offering this course, and so it's like a beta test of the program. It's gonna be, this is the first time it's presented, so it's gonna be the people who are participating. I'll be relying on your feedback to further craft